you guys have been asking me for quite a while to do like a top 10 list. It's something I've always resisted, but I'm going to bow to pressure, and as a festive treat for 2013, I'm going to give you my list of top solitaire games. It's a very subjective list, so let's start there with the caveats. You know, what my number one may not be your number one. There's going to be games on here which are higher up the list because they're solitaire, and maybe some games that are lower down the list because I prefer to play them multiplayer. All these games on this list I'm going to recommend as good, solid, solitaire games, but I've really struggled with positioning them in my top 10 list. So to that end, I've ended up with a top 30, and this has been tough enough as it is. So this is my top 30, and we're going to start with those 30 down to 26, which are really just honourable mentions. From 25 down, I'm going to devote perhaps 60 seconds to each game. But for the first 5, these ones which didn't quite make the top 25, but they're all still solid games that you can play solitaire. Honorim is a simple little card game. We have Legacy, the Testament of Duke de Crécy. Here, this is a great board game for 1 to 4 from Portal. But there's a nice little variant in here. Normally you're involved in kind of building this family tree, and there's a couple of one-player variants actually. There's a simple one which is just kind of a solitaire version of the base game, and then there's this variant which kind of sees the game in reverse. You're kind of researching your family tree and trying to fulfill missions. So I'll put this one at 29. There's a couple of victory point games. Infection, Humanity's Last Gasp from John Gibson, and Victory Point Games. This is a great little addition to their library of games. They do a lot of solitaire games. I've put this one in at number 28. But it's a wonderful little puzzle, and it's for one player only. And this is certainly worth picking up if you enjoy solitaire games. I mean, one of the things that attracts people, a lot of people say, why do you want to play games solitaire? Board games are about having some fun with friends, and yeah, absolutely are. But, you know, there's times when, you know, you don't fancy doing a crossword or Sudoku, and board games offer you a chance to relax with a game. Just put yourself in this other world for a little while, have a puzzle to solve, you know, kind of like a crossword. So that's why I like solitaire. It's a great way to unwind. So Infection is a great little puzzle game. Friday. This was really popular when it first came out. I don't know if you can still get hold of this. I guess you can. It's a nice little solo. Again, it's a solitaire only, so it's made for solitaire. And it's got wonderful, simple mechanics. Again, it's a card game where you're trying to Robinson Crusoe style overcome the challenges of being stranded on an island. And then just missing my top 25 is Circus Train. Again, Victory Point Games, Tom Decker. I did a nice series on this and the solitaire variant, but again, this is 1 to 5 this time. And it plays fine solitaire. We'll go watch my series, highly recommended. Okay, let's get into the real business of the top 25. Coming in at number 25, Castle Panic. I guess this one's come a little bit out of left field, but some of my choices will, and that's part of the fun, is finding games that I enjoy for different reasons. And with this one, it's very simple. This is a real good gateway game for solitaire. You have a hand of 6 cards that allow you to defeat these ever-encroaching creatures which are trying to bash down your castle. Your aim is to get rid of all these creatures, these orcs and trolls and goblins, and you can do that using your cards. So you've got cards which are hitting different zones. You've got a blue, red, green zone. You roll the die and you see where new monsters arrive. In the forest here, zone 4. Actually, this is a giant boulder, so you draw these random. They might have been a goblin, and this giant boulder would run until it hits an obstacle, and it could be flattening monsters as it goes, but when it hits your castle, it's going to take out a wall. And the idea is for you to to play these different cards. You've got things like brick, play this card with a mortar card. So if you manage to collect a brick and mortar, you can build up a wall that's been destroyed. And this one plays really nicely and quickly. It's real simple. It's the kind of game where it's not going to burn your brain. It's something you can just sit down with and roll some dice and draw some cards and just relax with and have a little bit of fun. And the other good thing is that other folks can kind of join in and play at any time with you as well. So, you know, if you're sitting here playing and your kiddies want to know what Dad's up to, have them join in, deal them a hand, just carry on playing. 24 is Police Precinct. Police Precinct is a really interesting game. It's a cooperative game, and as with many cooperative games, you can play them solitaire by taking on the role of more than one player. In a solitaire game, you can have this support car which comes around and helps you, but basically your objective is to travel the map, hunting down evidence. So here we've got an apartment warehouse with a stack of cards, and as you search through this stack of cards, you find nothing yet, and you're looking for the murder weapon. As can often happen, it ends up being right on the bottom of the deck. Okay, so there we've got the murder weapon, and you'll do this by travelling to these different locations. But along the way, and this is one of these things that you see in cooperative games, is there's things on the board that are going on to distract you from your mission. So you can see at the moment I've found a couple of pieces of evidence. I've found a blood splatter and some fingerprints from the crime scene down here. But there's these things, these emergencies, so you've got to do your day job, right? You've got to go and here we've got a burglary happening in an apartment. Over here we've got a road traffic accident that you need to go and resolve. So your players work together to balance your ability to investigate the murder with these emergencies which are going on around the map. And you've got a certain number of turns before the game ends and the murderer escapes. I love this game, I do enjoy this game. It's on my top 25. For me, this one is much more fun with more people, but there's nothing to stop you picking this up and enjoying it as a solitaire experience. It's great to beat the murderer. The basic game is quite simple. It's not difficult to beat, I find, personally, but there's lots of ways in which you can make it more difficult. And I'm really looking forward to seeing expansions, really developing this game. These emergencies are wonderfully varied and thematic, and you've got this idea of earning donuts as rewards that help you exchange skills with each other and level up your police officer. It does take up quite a lot of table space, and perhaps some of the other games offer more of a reward playing solitaire. At number 23, Flashpoint Fire Rescue. Again, this is a cooperative game for 2 to 6 players, which you can happily play solitaire. This is a fun game. It's easy to play. There's lots of action. I like the way these fires explode around this house, and your job as 2 or more firefighters is to go around the building, extinguishing flames, rescuing people. It uses an interesting mechanic in that you roll dice, and these spaces on the board have a coordinate. So this would be 2, 6, so this square here. And in that way, new fires spring up, points of interest get placed on the board. And if you play a more advanced version, you get firefighters with different abilities. So here's a paramedic, for example. It says that you can place a heal marker beneath victims in your space. And this means instead of having to carry this victim, they kind of become walking wounded, and they can walk out on their own. They can move without a firefighter. Your aim is to keep this fire under control while rescuing these victims, and if this fire reaches a critical point, walls start getting destroyed in the building, and the building will collapse. I love the artwork in this one. It's really colourful, and the game offers you a lot of tension and some quick and easy gameplay. That's number 23, Flashpoint Fire Rescue. Number 22, Race for the Galaxy with the Gathering Storm. Race for the Galaxy is a game for 2 to 4 players. It's a card game. A lot of people put this into the Euro game category because you're vying for victory points. And the Gathering Storm expansion offers a Solitaire variant where you play against this robot player. I like this game as a Solitaire. If a robot is very tough, I found. Once you've worked out a strategy with different worlds, then it becomes a little easier perhaps, but you can easily up the difficulty. So this one is really difficult to get that breakthrough first win. And that's what I do like that about a Solitaire game. It needs to be challenging, and Race for the Galaxy is definitely challenging. Why isn't this one higher up my list? I think just because, for me, this is a much better 2-player game, where you're pitting your skills against another human opponent who is responding to you in a much more intelligent way. They've done a wonderful job with this robot. I'm really impressed with it. It's one of the best ways of creating a dummy player that actually feels like it's reacting to you in some way. So if you're looking for a nice card game with a small footprint and something that you can play and can really twist your mind around and give you a proper challenge, then this one is a winner. The other thing about this game, if you like kind of sci-fi and space and that kind of thing, the artwork is it's just wonderful to play with cards of this quality with artwork this varied. So that's my number 22. Let's see the last game, which just missed the top 20. And number 21, Space Hulk Death Angel, the card game. Playing Solitaire, again, as in other cooperatives, you can play the role of multiple players. And if you're playing single player, it would recommend that you play 6 Space Marines. And these Space Marines exist in these locations, in this vertical row arrangement. This vertical corridor of players represents the location you're in, and there's different points along this corridor. There's things like a ventilation duct or a dark corner, or up here a door, and ultimately you can collect tokens here, and when you travel through this door, then the next location becomes slightly less intimidating, and you complete a location by getting through these decks here. These event cards play out each turn, and they put new gene stealers in the corridor, and these gene stealers can come up and down, and you've got to change the facing of your commandos and position of your commandos to deal with these gene stealers as they come out onto the board. And to do this, each of your Space Marines has 3 actions. They can attack, they can support, or they can move and activate. So moving and activate changes your positions in the corridor. Support means you get to place these support tokens, which increase your ability to attack and defend. Or attack, which allows you to roll the dice and attack and kill these gene stealers. So it's a fine little game, and it offers quite a good challenge as well. It's not easy to beat this game. The only thing perhaps that doesn't push it further up my list, and I think it does work really well as a Solitaire, is perhaps the lack of control you have over the dice. It feels like that the roll of the dice has a large impact on the game relative to the amount of control you have over the result of that die. It is just a 1d6, but you can control it to some extent with these support tokens, using your support action, which allow you to get rerolls. But putting these support tokens down is quite an investment. As with all Fantasy Flight games, really the component quality is great. The artwork's great, and if you know this environment, I think it's a Warhammer 40k thing. My son knows about this, but I don't. Then I suspect that the theme's going to be really appealing for you too. I like the puzzle, and I don't like the die roll quite so much, but for me it's still a good solid little Solitaire game. Okay, let's move into the top 20 now and see what made number 20. Number 20, Sentinels of the Multibus. This game has so much going for it in terms of variety and deck play. You have lots of different heroes that you can add, and lots of different villains that you can add, and lots of different locations. And you can end up with some real good combinations. This one, again, is a multiplayer game that you can play, because it's cooperative, you can play Solitaire, but it's a minimum of 3 players, really. But this would be higher, and I love this as a multiplayer game. Playing Solitaire, I find it really tough to do all the bookkeeping, managing 3 hands, working out which cards to play, managing the health, and you have this bunch of tokens that kind of help you. So you can put things on if abilities come out that make you take 1 less damage and so on. I think there's even an iOS app that helps you manage this, but you know, when I'm playing a board game or a card game, I don't want electronics involved. That's my personal taste. Locations is where this battle's being fought, if you like, and the location deck, kind of like event decks are used in other games. They're influencing the play around the table and put more pressure on you. Your aim is to beat this villain down. Each of your heroes has a hand of cards, and they can play ongoing cards or one-shot cards to damage the villain that you're fighting. Each of your heroes will have a power as well that you can use once per turn. So you've got power effects and these different card effects, and you're drawing up to a hand size each turn. The villain is taking his phase, and each villain comes with its own little bit of AI, if you like, or methods that change the way that villain plays. And also draw out location cards on each turn. So this is the final wasteland. We've got a Mongolian death worm, a New Jersey devil. Okay? And what you're going to enjoy about this game is all that interplay of cards and finding combinations of cards that play well and work well together. So if you like all that kind of stuff, then you're going to enjoy playing this game, even Solitaire. But like I say, for me it would be higher, but there's some other card play games which, and I'm thinking of deck builders perhaps, which for me work better Solitaire, mostly because of that bookkeeping thing that just takes a little bit of the edge off for me. But all the interplay of cards and the variation and replayability of this game is fabulous. So that's my number 20, Sentinels of the Multiverse. Number 19, Thunderstone Advance. Thunderstone Advance is a deck building game, and I'm not sure if this is the only one. There might be another one on my list. And I've got a ton of cards for this. And it's set in this Thunderstone kind of fantasy world of skeletons and orcs, and not kind of like Dungeons and Dragons and elves and things, but it's a little bit darker. Thunderstone Advance is a great little deck builder. It's one of those ones where you have to, you can go off and build your deck from this village. You have things like heroes here. These are guys that you can use to fight monsters that are appearing in the dungeon hall. And as these monsters march down the hall, they'll drop off the end and raid the village. Again, this is one of these games that I think plays better multiplayer. It's a fine solitaire game, but it just feels like you're, I don't know. I love the fact that you go shopping and you build your deck, and I love all that. And that's what the attraction is, that you're looting up and leveling up your heroes and fighting these monsters, and these things come out randomly. I think the multiplayer game will give you more opportunities to be a bit more strategic with the way you treat these monsters in the dungeon hall. Otherwise, the gameplay is much the same. So, if you like the idea of having a deck that you can build and shopping for cards, there's a ton of variety. Okay, so you've got an example game set up here. You've got Taproot Blade, a longsword, Charm of Venery, Radiant Orb. So you've got spells, items, weapons, and heroes. But you've also got these villagers. We've got a stable hand here and a historian. And each one of these cards will bring different abilities to your deck and allow you to play out different strategies. So like Sentinels, there's a ton of replayability here, but it's a lot easier to manage because you can play this solitaire. You've got one deck of cards, one hand, just you against the game. There's no complicated housekeeping. There's no hit points to worry about. You have these experience points that you can spend. You can use those to level up your heroes. Different cards can also allow you to spend these to do different things. So there's a ton of replayability, there's a ton of variability, both with the monsters and what's set up and what's available in the village. And then, of course, your strategy about which heroes you want to develop in your deck. That's my number 19, Thunderstone Advance. At number 18, Raziel. Raziel is made for solitaire play, and it's a great little puzzle, and it can be quite challenging. But this is certainly is a great one to break out and give your brain a workout, because this one really does need some thinking about. You're going to be taking actions on this board, and there's different spaces where you can take your actions. You can move these Valkyries from Rainbow Island in Midgard here to these other islands, and when you do so, you draw from a bag. Maybe this is the one element I don't like, is these bags. But you draw a number of these, and you'll get either fire giants or Vikings. Fire giants are bad; they go back in. Vikings are good, and you can place these on your player card. So this is your god, if this is the god that you're playing. Here I've got one from an expansion, and each god has a power that alters the way or the strategy of your game. But this is again one of these where you're racing against time, because these guys, your enemies, are marching towards the wall of Asgard here, or the door of Valhalla. And then Odin's residence. If one of the enemies gets here, you lose. I think it's 3 or more beyond the door, you lose, or 5 or more beyond the wall, you lose. And you win if you get through this deck of enemy cards. And each time this enemy deck comes out, these things are advancing. And the way to push them back is you roll these dice. Okay, and you've got to score hits against these guys, and that'll push them back. And you can do this and improve your chances with these Vikings or these the world of the elves. You can grab these, that gives you bonuses. So you can put actions here to go to Midgard and draw Vikings or fire giants. You can go to the Dwarven Forge and find new ways of leveling up to beat these guys. And you've also got these giants. These are here in this ice fortress, and as they come out, they knock certain actions out and make it more difficult for you to win. There isn't a great deal of variability in, but it's designed it is designed for multiple players, but it gets increasingly more difficult. It is quite complex. It's quite hard to get into, but once you've got the flow of the game, it plays quite quickly. It can just be challenging or frustrating depending on your mood. So this is one of those ones where I have to be in the right mood, but when I am, it's a great challenge and a lovely little solitaire puzzle. Number 17, Pandemic from Z-Man Games. Pandemic is one of those games that you will have heard a lot of people talk about. And it's possibly one of the first games that introduced people to cooperative games. But it also plays really well, like a lot of cooperatives do, solitaire. A nice, easy starting combination is to play the medic and the scientist, because each player has a different role. So if you're playing solitaire, you want to play 2, 3 or 4. So two's fine. And the idea of this game is that each turn you're taking 4 actions, and with those 4 actions you're moving from city to city around the world, and you're curing diseases. So what's happening is each turn one of these cards comes out. It depends on the infection rates. This one says Delhi, and that will put new cubes in Delhi. And one of the clever things that Pandemic does, and this mechanic it introduces, at some point there's something going to be called an epidemic is going to occur. And when an epidemic occurs, you move the infection rate up, we infect a new city, but this time you draw it from the bottom of the deck. Okay, so it's draw from the bottom. This was time it says St. Petersburg. And then you reshuffle the discard back in. Okay, so the idea is that, or back on top, so these get shuffled and go back on top. So what that means is cities that have been previously infected will become infected again. You're intensifying the propagation of those diseases in cities which have come up before. And also they have this kind of chain linking event type thing. So let's see if we have Lagos has come out here. And the maximum number of disease cubes each city can hold is 3. So the idea is that if you draw Lagos again and you've not dealt with that threat, then it kind of spreads to connected. So these cities are connected. And this is called an outbreak. And if this pushes this track up, and if this track moves up to 8, then you lose the game. Similarly, if you run out of cubes of any one colour, then you lose the game. And the interesting aspect here is that if we have an outbreak at Lagos, you put another cube in. Here we got Kinshasa. This would also cause a kind of a chain-linked, this ripple effect. So every city that's connected that's already at its maximum, and suddenly these boom, bang, and oftentimes what happens is you'll run out of cubes because one of these outbreaks will kind of blow your game. And you win by discovering cures. These basic mechanics have been taken and expanded and used again in subsequent games, and those sorts of games, well, like Flashpoint Fire Rescue in a way, but you may see these kind of games coming up again on my list, perhaps a little bit higher up because of the theme and perhaps the way that this is kind of the foundation to lots of other games of this genre appearing. So that's my number 17, Pandemic. Number 16, Forbidden Island. It's strange how different games kind of rank slightly higher than others. I mean, this is a very Pandemic-esque type game, but I prefer it because I think it plays a little easier, and I don't know. It's just I think there's more things about the game that I enjoy. Each player gets a hand of cards, and again, you're trying to find sets. So here's three lions. If you can get to one of these locations, the Whispering Garden or the Howling Garden, and discard a set, you'll get this treasure. Collect all treasures and make it to Fool's Landing. There's a helicopter pad here, and once you've got all your adventurers here, you can take off and win the game. But during this game, there's going to be like a flood phase, kind of like the pandemic spreading diseases. You draw a card, and the observatory, it says here, and that tile gets flooded. And when you hit a water's rise, you move this tracker up, and if it gets to the top, you lose. So there's so many of these cards in the player deck. But then you reshuffle the cards that you've discarded, these flood cards, back into this deck. Or onto the top of, just like Pandemic, really. Now, if a tile should get flooded more than once, so this observatory or Breaker's Bridge, so when these come out again, then those tiles disappear. So this island is slowly getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and at some point, you've got to manage your strategy of keeping everything joined up so you can make it to Fool's Landing, so that you're not losing the Howling Gardens. If both these disappeared and you haven't got the treasure, then there's no way that you can win the game. All right, so you've got to go around and take actions to unflood these locations. So for me, I think this one deserves its place at number 16 as a descendant of Pandemic, if you like. A little bit simpler. I find the artwork more attractive, the setup, but I think the reward and the way that you can actually visually see the island disappearing. You've gotten a feeling of how well you're doing within the game, and a clear perspective on your target. I understand there's a new game called Forbidden Desert now. It's the same kind of game, but I've not played it, but it's getting good reviews, and I think a lot of people say they prefer it to this one, but look into it. This is my list. It's not on my list because I don't have Forbidden Desert, but if it's anything like this one, then it's worth a look.